Good morning, everybody, and welcome to my first TikTok live of 2026. What I didn't realise is I just had to go through some ID preparation to go live. I had to put my date of birth in, scan my face. What a palaver. Anyway, I'm here now. So let's jump straight into how are you guys doing? How was your Christmas and how was your New Year? Mine was super quiet. We usually go away for Christmas. This time we decided to stay in the UK. It was okay, absolutely, but it kind of was just another day. It wasn't as Christmassy, so I kind of missed that. And obviously the advice line stayed open all through Christmas and New Year, so I was sort of working as well, although that was perfectly fine. So, welcome to everybody. Loads of people joining. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So, let's jump into the headlines this morning. Now, I'm going to start with GB News because I did say I was going to go right across the board. And this is about HSBC, who have just announced and been the first major UK lender to cut mortgage rates for 2026. So that's announced today. And they are announcing reductions across their range of both residential and buy-to-let mortgage products. So the banking group confirm it will lower rates on both owner-occupier and landlord mortgages, making an early move in what industry figures say could be an increasingly competitive year for lending. The decision follows the reduction in the Bank of England's base rate in December, which also eased funding pressure on lenders and improved condition for mortgage pricing. Industry professionals say the move signals HSBC's intention to increase lending volumes in the early year. Ben Parks, who is the managing director of Sowerbridge-based Orchard Financial Advising, says this is a real statement of intent and shows that they are keen to lend en masse this year. I mean, that can only be good for the industry. Whether you are a first-time buyer, whether you are adding to your portfolio, those lower rates on mortgages can only be a bonus. And hopefully we will see that sort of balance out the property sector in a way, because at the moment we are seeing, Zoopla have just released their latest figures, and we're seeing quite an unbalance in the property market at the moment. Rental prices have risen, but they're stagnating slightly, and there has been a rise in flat sales, but not house sales. So there seems to be a little bit of a shift in the market. And hopefully if other lenders now sort of scrabble to not be left behind from HSBC's announcement today, we will see more mortgage products available for first-time buyers. Now, that doesn't mean suddenly we're going to run out of tenants. That's never going to happen. The private rented sector houses around 4.6 million people. All of those people suddenly aren't going to go out and be first-time buyers. A lot of people still genuinely won't be able to meet mortgage criteria. There are people that don't have the deposit, and there are people like me that at the moment, I don't want to live in an owner-occupied property. I'm quite happy renting. It's easy for me if I need to move. I just need to hand in my notice and off I go. Whereas if I owned, I've got to think about, do I rent it out? Do I sell? So there's quite a lot that goes into deciding to be a tenant or deciding to own or occupy. But it's interesting to now wait and see what the industry is going to do. Will it follow? How many other lenders are now going to have the same reaction to HSBC? So I'm now going to move on to Property Industry Eye. Now, this caught my eye this morning because it's a little bit controversial, I think. And the headline is, "New funding welcomed, but court reforms need to speed up evictions," says Propertymark. Now, obviously, we know Propertymark, formerly Arla or Arla Propertymark, however you want to say them, are the voice of the letting agency industry. And they are always usually standing quite close with the NRLA and any other lobbying groups for the industry when it comes to consultations in the government, etc., etc. So just to give you an idea of what this headline is about, the UK government announced a multi-million-pound funding package to expand access to free legal advice for people in England facing eviction or home repossession. So that's tenants and owner-occupiers that are being repossessed by their lender. It has welcomed them as steps in the right direction, but further reforms are needed to ensure the system works effectively for all parties. Almost 20 million has been allocated over the next 3 years. 20 million in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money. I wouldn't mind it in my bank account, but it's not a lot of money. And over 3 years, it kind of waters down the effect, I think. So over the 3 years, the 20 million is there to support legal services for people dealing with issues including debt, employment and family matters. Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy said the funding was aimed at ensuring those facing the most challenging situations had available support. Is that needed? Because we currently have the Housing Advice Service, which was launched, goodness me, when was that launched? A couple of years ago now, because that's when the How to Rent Guide was updated to include that. So we have that already. Courts, 9 times out of 10, have a duty solicitor that you can talk to. You've got Citizens Advice, you've got Shelter. So there's lots of advice out there. Interestingly, to see where this is going to go. But Propertymark have actually said on their website, have released a statement. Propertymark has long argued that access to justice is a critical part of well-functioning housing sector. I agree. But I think that advice should also be free and accessible to landlords as well. Delays, complexity and under-resourcing within the court system can be damaging for tenants, landlords and agents alike, often prolonging disputes and increasing cost to all parties. I do not disagree with that whatsoever. Propertymark go on to say, we have consistently called for reforms that improve efficiency, fairness and confidence in the housing justice system. This includes ensuring that people facing possession can access timely legal advice while also enabling landlords to resolve legitimate cases without excess delay. Now, to me, I've got several hats on with this. I've been a letting agent, I've been there, I am a tenant, I am a landlord, but I'm also a qualified mediator. So for me, this kind of stinks a little bit of we're trying to put a sticking plaster on an arterial bleed. That's not going to work. But I think if they brought in a more robust mediation service, then you could resolve a lot of these issues before they even needed to get into the judicial system itself formally. We have it at the moment in small claims because there was the Supreme Court ruling of Churchill versus Merthyr Tydfil Council, where the court basically turned around and said, you haven't done anything to try and resolve this before you came in front of the judge. Go off and get mediation. And that actually changed the civil procedure rules. Civil procedure rules 44, off the top of my head, don't quote me on that one, which basically meant you had to do ADR, which is alternative dispute resolution, before putting yourself in front of a judge. And I genuinely believe if you had some form of mediation available to the private rented sector, then you would not get so many cases in front of a judge. Yeah, I'm not saying it's going to solve the problem. There are going to be cases that do need to go in front of a judge. But I had a case a couple of weeks ago where a tenant wanted just over 8.5 grand in compensation for how she'd been treated. And all the landlord wanted was for the tenant to leave. Now, it looked like they were a long, long way away from any kind of coming together. But actually, as we work through their issues, their problems, their concerns, their angst, it turned out this was nothing more genuinely than a clash of personalities. These two human beings just were not going to get on this planet. So the mediator that we had on the case, one of my team, he worked through that. And eventually it came down to the tenant getting just under 2 grand in compensation because the landlord admitted maybe the bias there. She just didn't like the tenant, so maybe she had treated her a little bit differently. And the landlord made a formal apology. Tenant moved out. Problem solved. Didn't need to go in front of a judge. But also, the courts are very restricted on the outcome they can deliver. They can only deliver within the legislation that they're working with, whereas mediation, as long as it's legal, we can provide any outcome you want. Anyway, moving on. So the next one I'm going to move on to is a property reporter. And the headline is, rental supply grows, but fall-throughs rise as sector adapts to new legislation. Dun, dun, dun. Sounds very dramatic, doesn't it? So basically, this is working on some statistics of the most recent property data. So rental properties newly marketed rose by 8.6% in 2025, with an average of just over 108,000 properties listed per month. That's compared to just under 100,000 in 2024. However, this figure reflects tenant turnover and movement of existing properties re-entering the market rather than genuine additions to the housing stock. Despite the supply increasing, average rents remain largely flat. Like I said earlier, they're sort of stagnating. Tenants agreed to pay around $1,500 per month on average in 2025, down marginally on 2024, but honestly not by a lot at all. The figures fluctuate depending on property types, obviously, and location, with central London having its own little property bubble, as it always does. October saw the busiest rental activity, with the highest average let agreed reaching £1,629, and the most properties actually coming onto the market. That's a contrast for January, where the record was the lowest at 1,400. As we know, the rental market faces significant regulatory changes throughout 2025, including the Renters' Rights Act coming in for 2026 in May, and the Housing Scotland Act, which obviously will affect further issues in Scotland. While these measures brought enhanced tenant protections, they also increase complexities for landlords through stricter tax framework and obviously energy efficiency methods that are coming through. Meanwhile, property sales transactions experienced growing stability. That's a good sign. Deals falling through rose, however, by 3.9% year on year, climbing from 240,000 in 2024 to 250,000 in 2025. The average price of property affected by fall through increased from 362,000 to 365,000. July, however, proved to be the worst month for collapsed transactions, with over 28,000 deals falling through. December saw the lowest number of transactions, which was 14,000. Now, we don't really know, and no one's got that crystal ball to predict what is happening in 2026. There are a lot of people who are looking at selling, landlords with existing portfolios. I mean, there's a million reasons why that's happening. It could have been their exit strategy for the next 5 years. They're just bringing that forward. It could be amateur landlords who just don't want to deal with the Renters' Rights Act. And there are also people that genuinely just want to free up the equity. They don't like what Rachel Reeves is saying and they want to move on, maybe move to Dubai. Who knows? But it's just interesting to see those figures. And I think sometimes it's not as dramatic out there as the media would like us to think. You know, when yes, there is a housing crisis. Yes, there is a crisis with people, so many people in poverty in this country. But I think from a property perspective, it's not as dramatic. It's not the end of the world, I think. Although anybody waiting for housing, for example, social housing on the council waiting list, I think that's increasing. And I might actually look at the figures for that later on. So let's move on to our next headline. And that is agents using drones face new rules from tomorrow. Dun, dun, dun. Now, I have to admit, this is not immediately breaking news today. This is one that actually came out on New Year's Day, but I thought it was important because drones are something that we, not me personally, but we're all starting to incorporate more. Letting agents and estate agents and some landlords out there are using the drones to get that sort of 360 look of the property when they're putting it on the market. So from New Year's Day, agents using small drones for photography and marketing face new rules. The rules apply primarily to drones weighing 100 grams, that's tiny, to 250 grams. Existing regulations applying to larger drones weighing 250 grams and over will remain in place, restricting agents from flying them within 50 metres of people and 150 metres of residential buildings. Now that's going to cause a bit of a problem if you're trying to market a residential building with people. So that's going to be an issue. The new rules for smaller drones include mandatory theory tests, required to be passed to secure a flying ID. This test is free and must be renewed every 5 years. How many people are going to forget that 5-year limit? Drone users must also register with the operator ID with the Civil Aviation Authority. Although it says here under 12s must be supervised. Now, I'm hoping there are no under 12s working in agency, because I think that might be slave labour. There are various aerospace restrictions as well. So where I live here in Bedfordshire, we've got Luton Airport just down the road. And as you can imagine, there'll be a lot of airspace restrictions. We have a lot of stacking systems and stuff here. So I just thought that was interesting to look at. I know not independently directly property related, but still interesting, I think. So let's move on to another headline. This is in Landlord Today, and this is 5 key changes for landlords in 2026. So I thought this was interesting because every time someone puts out the 5 top, things to do, they're always so different. So obviously they talk about the major overhaul of legislation with the Renters' Rights Act. Removal of Section 21 evictions, and also no more fixed term tenancies. But the key thing that they talk about here is running your property will cost more, a lot more. That's actually their heading. Rising maintenance and operation costs are expected to bite landlords hard in 2026. Materials, labour and insurance premiums continue to rise, while rental incomes stay sluggish, as we've just seen in the previous report. Especially given new limits on rent increases. Now, that refers to, under the Renters' Rights Act, you'll only be able to increase rent once a year, and it will also have to be in line with the market rate. Market rate can fluctuate both up and down depending on what's going on in your little area. So that could have a direct effect on the cash flow for landlords. One of the recent tax changes even raises the amount landlords pay on rental income, squeezing the margins even further. And I think that means for landlords, budgeting and forward planning is going to be something that is going to have to be a day-to-day task. You're going to have to be more proactive with maintenance rather than reactive with maintenance. Don't wait for the tenant to report it. Actually get in there, do the inspections, have those conversations. I think it's the only way you're going to get on top of things. And then finding and keeping good tenants will be tougher than ever. I do agree with that to a point. However, I think as long as you have a really robust referencing process and you are taking your time to choose the right tenants, then it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Because ultimately, if you are literally putting the first person in that applies because you don't want that void, you can't guarantee that you're going to get the best person. It's a bit like interviewing for a job. So you as the employer want to have the best candidate for that job. You're doing exactly the same here as a landlord. You are interviewing the tenant to ensure that they are the best tenant for that property. More so in HMOs, because you've got to make sure the personalities fit and the lifestyles fit, because you don't want an 18-year-old student whose music's banging till 4 a.m. while you've got someone in their 50s that needs to get up to go to work. That balance isn't going to work. So I just thought that was quite interesting that they picked on that as one of their top 5. And then finally, I thought this was a nice one to finish on. And I think probably, again, it's going to be a bit controversial. This is in Landlord Today. And it's councils will manage landlords' rental property during 2-year ban. Now, this focuses on a landlord who also has a letting agency, and he has been banned by Durham Council from letting a property or managing a property or doing anything with a property for 2 years. So this was a landlord who repeatedly put vulnerable tenants into a property that failed all the minimum safety standards that is required out there. He didn't have smoke detectors, no CO monitors, nothing. He also failed to get a selective licence. But when the property tribunal and the councils tried to engage with him, he failed to engage also. So he was hit with a hefty fine of $63,000 plus costs and charges, and basically banned from renting out or doing anything with a property for 2 years. Now, he actually has 14 properties in his portfolio, And the article doesn't specify whether the banning order is for all of his properties or just this particular property. Now, it would be a concern if it was for all properties, because that means you've now got 13 properties, sitting empty. We all know that if a property isn't lived in, it starts to just go to rack and ruin. I don't know what it is about buildings, but if they're not occupied, they tend to just sort of die and fall apart really quickly. So they're not occupied. Yes, he's not getting an income, but you know, that was kind of his own fault. But also, surely from the government's perspective, if he's not getting an income, he's not paying tax, the government aren't scraping that bit off the top either. And you've got 13 properties which are not available to people currently needing housing. So there seems to be a little of a juxtaposition there for me. I think it's kind of cutting your nose off to spite your face. But the one property that was specific to this case, the council have actually taken control of. So the tenants are still in the property, and the council will run that property for the next 2 years while this particular landlord is banned. And it does say in here that the council did say applying for a banning order was not a decision that we took lightly, but it reflects just how serious the offences are. We hope this serves as a stark warning to other landlords and letting agents of what can happen if they fail to manage their properties and standards required. And while this is a last resort, we won't hesitate to take further action if needed. The council said ahead of the tribunal that the landlord had sold 11 of his properties. He had retained 15, including 2 that were occupied. We will manage the occupied properties for the duration of the ban, says the authority. So I think it's just going to show that councils are taking a stand on rogue landlords. And ultimately, what does that mean moving forward with the Renters' Rights Act? And of course, the new powers that came in for councils on the 27th of December last year, 2025. Yes, I think they're going to go for low-hanging fruit because that just makes sense. So once the portal comes in, once the database comes in, if your ducks aren't in a row, then maybe the councils are going to come after you rather than go searching for someone who's doing something wrong. But I think also the Renters' Rights Act might make tenants more confident to report rogue landlords and poor standards like this landlord here. And hopefully that will in itself almost voluntarily improve the standards in the industry as we move forward. So thank you very much for coming on and watching my first live of 2026 today and going through the property headlines with me. I have seen lots and lots of questions and comments come up. So what I'm going to do is just read through those now, see if there's any questions that I can answer sort of off the bat. Let me just scroll up here. Everyone's saying good morning, good morning, good morning. What questions do we have? No questions. Oh, thank you. Who gave me a gift? Uncharted Exploration. Thank you very much for my gift. And you sent me a rose. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Let's have a look what else we've got. Any questions? Maybe I'm not looking in the right place for questions. It's all new to me, this live nonsense. Oh, there we go. So we've got one here. Hi. If we issue Section 21 now, do we have to give a reason at all? Or is that of none of the tenants' business? Well, I would say Section 21 is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a no-fault eviction. So basically you are issuing a Section 21 because the tenants have done nothing wrong. You just want your property back, please. So you do not have to give a reason. And if the tenants ask, you can either be honest with them or you can just say, I don't have to give you a reason, I just want my property back. So you don't have to give a reason, it's a no fault. I think a few people have actually answered that for me as well. Another one here, I've received a Section 21 after 14 years and never missed a rent payment or any complaints. I'm really sorry to hear that, but unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast of being an assured short hold tenant. Your landlord can serve a Section 21 at any point after certain criteria have been met. You don't have to have done anything wrong. You don't have to have missed your rent. You don't have to have made any complaints. That landlord is either, needing to sell or maybe moving back in. We don't know, but unfortunately, that's just the way the cookie crumbles with that. I'm the same. I'm an AST tenant myself. I've always got that worry hanging over me. So I've got another one here. I've been on the council waiting list since 2010. Flipping heck. It isn't easy out there, and I think when I look on social media and see landlords who have had requests from their tenants to serve Section 21 because they want a council house, I think that's deluded. There isn't council stock anymore. They don't have it. They sold it all off, or it went to right to buy, where a lot of the council stock got sold to its tenants but were never actually replaced. Under the Homeless Reduction Act, the council do actually have a legal obligation to discharge their duty into the private sector if they don't have housing stock available. So you could actually find yourself back in the private sector, but I really hope you get the council house that you need. Thank you again for all my gifts and my roses. I don't know what they all mean, but thank you. Fabulous. I think that's it. Oh no, I've got, my tenants want me to evict them so they can get a council house. Ah, there you go. Well, I've just covered that, interestingly. They're very unlikely to get a council house. First of all, they need to meet the 5 legal tests of homelessness. If they don't, then all they're going to be owed is the prevention duty and the relief duty. Prevention is the council talking to you and seeing if they can avoid the eviction altogether. If they can't, once you evict, all the tenants will get is the relief duty. So they'll be put into temporary accommodation, and then again the duty will probably just be discharged, obviously depending on the tenant's situation. But unless they meet the 5 legal tests of homelessness, they're not going to get a council house. It just ain't going to happen. So thank you again for joining me today. I'm done it in half an hour-ish. I'm quite impressed. So join me again tomorrow and we will go through the headlines again. If there's anything specific that you want me to focus on, or if there's a specific live you want me to do on a topic, let me know. I would be more than happy to do that. And yeah, join me tomorrow. Oh, I've got another question. What is the rental market like in the future? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately. I'd love to know what the rental market will be like in the future. I mean, realistically, we know people will always need homes. That problem is not going to be solved overnight. So realistically, people are always going to want to rent privately because not everybody wants to own and not everybody wants to live in social housing. So the private rented sector will always fill a need. What that looks like in the future, I don't know. Will there be less individually owned properties? Will it be more limited companies? Will it be more corporations like BlackRock and things like that? Don't know. Who knows? If anybody does know, let me know. If anyone's been to the future, can you just come back and just let us know what the crack is? That'd be great. Thanks so much. Thank you everyone for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you all again soon.